Hello, everyone. My name is Shivani, and I am the Director of Programs and Partnerships on LookUp's Team Leadership Council. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about digital well-being. Now, I know that many people might look at that term and say that, well, what's there to think about in terms of digital well-being, right? I mean, people like being on their phones. People like being on Instagram. I like being on Instagram. And I think there are a lot of pros and cons to technology and social media use. But today I want to highlight a different side of it, a side of it that not a lot of young people tend to talk about, which I think is something that we should acknowledge. And that is the negative, right? With social media comes addiction, comes an insecurity from seeing idealized views of life. There is bullying that happens on these platforms. There are lots of ways in which our identities are manipulated and controlled without our own knowledge. And so a lot of this stuff is not usually common knowledge. I mean, we don't really think about how our ideas are being manipulated when we're scrolling. We don't really think about that. But in reality, that is what's happening, right? It's also kind of a manifestation of a form of addiction. When you're scrolling for many hours on your phone, at that moment, you have this instant gratification, that's the right word, this gratification that you're getting from scrolling or being on your phone. And it's causing you to be distracted from what's going on within your personal life. That's one of the main causes, actually, of social media addiction, escapism, right? And so we see that this overuse of technology is happened as a result of a lot of things, whether that be something going on in your personal life, or whether that be simply boredom. And so with that, a lot of people might look at it and say, well, that's not a problem, right? You're bored or you don't want to be involved in something and you just scroll on your phone. But it becomes more than that. Once it becomes a habit, it sort of consumes you, right? I mean, there's so many times when I am a young person, really just miss out on things because I've chosen to sit at home on my phone, or when I'm at a party or a birthday party and I'm sitting there and we're all just on our phones when we're supposed to be celebrating someone. And I think the entire culture of how we live has sort of been shaped in a negative way in that sense, but also positively. I'm sitting here and talking to you guys today because of technology. I got to meet wonderful innovators and learn from peers through technology. And so I do think there are pros and cons, and the solution is to be a mindful user of technology and social media. And I have a kind of suggestion for all of you, right? And the first thing is to figure out where you stand. Is technology a problem for you? Is social media a problem for you? Is it something that is consuming your life? Or is it something that is adding value to you? So this is kind of a qualitative look at things, right? Where do you stand on this scale almost? Some people need to spend more time on social media, according to them. They feel disconnected, FOMO maybe, right? So for some people, it's something like that too. But for others, for most of us, I'd say 90% of the population, we have the opposite problem. We are far too involved with these particular platforms. And some of us are in that middle ground where we are the total control over what we're doing. And for those people, I applaud you. Please teach me your ways. But what I would do first for anyone who is looking to figure out what digital wellness really is open up your phone. Now, most phones, I believe, I am an Apple user myself, we have screen time on there. And so I know a lot of other phones also have a similar function. What I would do is I would go onto that function and I would see how long I'm spending on my phone, for a day, for a week. And you would be shocked as to that number. And then break it down a little bit. Which apps are you spending the most time on? What times a day are you spending the most time on your phone, on your social media devices or social media apps, right? And then once you do that, kind of relatively connected. The first thing that I did when I looked at this time was, I'm a math person. So I calculated about what % of my life I would be losing just by scrolling on Instagram. And you see this, like at the end of the day, it becomes years of your life where you were just scrolling, which is kind of crazy to think about, right? What you could have been doing in those multiple hours in a week, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it really just adds up. So that's what I would do first. The second thing I would do is, if it's a problem for you, acknowledge that it is a problem. I think acknowledging is the first step in growing and figuring out where you can go in terms of digital wellness. And honestly, in terms of a lot of other things, Problem identification has been proven to be very helpful in a lot of other forms of self-development. So once you identify that there is a problem, you have to find out the root or the trigger of the problem. For me, when I had an issue with over-dependence on social media, it was because I was overwhelmed at school, or it was because I was kind of wanting to detach from reality. That was sort of my trigger. And so what I did was I took that trigger and I identified that the response associated with that trigger was going on social media. And so what I did was kind of internally, I developed another result from the trigger, so another hook, if you will. So whenever I had that trigger, I instead picked up a book. At the end of the day, I still wasn't doing my homework, but that's a completely different problem. So the first thing I would do is that, once you've identified it's a problem, figure out your trigger and figure out how to swap the action associated with the trigger. And so, yeah, that is definitely a way to develop self-control when it comes to interacting with these different, apps. And so I think a lot of people, there's a whole spectrum with people who are interested in digital wellness, right? There are the group of people who are not really sure it's a big deal, which I'm sure you guys will change your mind once you take a look at what percent of your life is really going towards this. And there's also another group of people who are strong activists. And for you, I have a special sort of saying prepared. The digital age is volatile. It's beneficial in many ways and harmful in others. But we as a team can work to bring balance across the spectrum. LookUp in particular addresses the youth mental health crisis through the promotion of digital well-being and ethical technology. We hold a wide variety of webinars and competitions to encourage innovation and ideation in finding solutions to these problems. The power of young people to shape this industry is growing as we exchange ideas, seek help, and learn to develop practical solutions. As an involved student, you can be at the forefront of this movement, or you can use this platform to share your story and receive guidance. So if anyone is interested in kind of making that change, there's a lot of things you can do within your own school. For example, you could open up a club that's an affiliate of LookUp. You can join our team leadership council. There's a lot of ways where you can explore and try to make an impact on your community, perhaps even through mentorship. I have worked with a lot of people like Susan herself, and also a lot of college students and innovators who have really provided me with some great discussion and some great perspectives. Now, I wish the problem with digital well-being was only about how much time we're spending on our phones, but unfortunately, it's a lot more than that, and that comes to a more nuanced problem. So in addition to addiction and dependence on technology, there is the actual content of what goes on in the app. Right. For instance, I'm going to take bullying, cyberbullying. With the app, and depending on who you're friending and the way the app's culture works, I'll take Instagram, for example. The way Instagram's culture, it's based on likes and comments and shares and all of that stuff. And people look at that as a sense of validation, right? Do people reshare my post? Are people commenting on it? How many likes did I get? How many likes did she get? How many likes did he get? And that in itself kind of affects our confidence. It affects the way we perceive ourselves as individuals amongst a society, as students in a school. And so I think that is also something else that should be taken into consideration. And I implore you guys to actually turn off your comment section in your Instagram, especially if you're facing that as an issue. If you enjoy reading comments, I encourage you to keep it on. It really depends on how you're interacting with these platforms and what they bring to you. In terms of value addition and in terms of identity shaping, I think that's also another place where content plays a role. And that's in what we see, what exactly we see, right? So sometimes we look at misinformation. Sometimes we look at strongly emotional responses to things that might be skewed. Other times we look at things that are not exactly adding anything to our lives, right? I'd say 80% of the things that I see on TikTok have not added anything except for maybe a small entertainment factor. 90% of the time, I kind of look at all these videos and cringe a little bit, not gonna lie. But I think that acknowledging the fact that there are good and bad in what we see, and considering what we're looking at, especially when we're being exposed to quote unquote factual information or opinions on a lot of current events through social media. That's like another way where I would think twice, right? Whatever you're looking at on social media, regardless of whether it's about a current event, a scientific fact, or even just a video of someone with their morning routine, right? We look at these idealized views of life, whether that be lifestyles or information, and we think that this is how we have to live. We think this is what we have to believe in. We think that in order to be successful, you need to wake up at 5 a.m. and attend Harvard, or there's this set of expectations that are now being ingrained into us that are beyond the scope of what previous generations have seen, simply because of increased exposure. So when you look at all this content, and I'm coming to my point here, make sure that you do it with a grain of salt. You take in everything, acknowledging that this is what's being seen, but also acknowledge the fact that some of this might not be true. One, not everyone wakes up at 5 a.m. every day and has like a solid schedule down. Not everyone works 36 hours within a 24 hours period. And yes, I did say that. I've heard people say stuff like that, not gonna lie. And so once you acknowledge that, this is kind of a little bit of a entertainment value that's been added to the information that we're seeing, it puts things into perspective. Particularly with pictures of extremely good-looking people. I'm sure there are people who look like that in real life, but not the quantity, which is not like to the degree that is being expressed on social media. And so all of this taken into consideration is important when you develop your viewpoint on the world, when you develop your own value system and your own moral system. And I think that's an important consideration. So like I said, digital wellness overall is extremely nuanced. It involves the way we interact with the app. It involves what social media provides to us content-wise, what we provide to it in terms of our time, our effort. And yeah, so I think that when you use all these platforms, you should be mindful and you should be considerate of others.